the battlefield was chaos. Dust, smoke, and gunfire swallowed the horizon as 381 Navy SEALs found themselves trapped deep behind enemy lines. Ammunition was running low, communications were scrambled, and every exit had been cut off. Commanders on the ground whispered the unthinkable. This might be it. The ambush had been ruthless. Waves of enemy fighters pushed in from every angle. Mortar rained down, armored convoys advanced, and the narrow valley that once seemed secure became a steel trap. For hours, the SEALs fought tooth and nail, refusing to surrender, but even their legendary endurance had limits. Men who had never known fear began glancing at each other, silently acknowledging the grim reality they were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Then, through the storm of gunfire, a low rumble built in the distance. At first, the soldiers thought it was thunder, another cruel joke from the heavens as the battlefield turned against them. But the rumble grew sharper, louder, until it roared like a beast across the sky. Every man turned his head upward. What they saw made their hearts pound. Cutting through the clouds came the unmistakable silhouette of an A-10 Thunderbolt U-boat known as the Warthog. Its twin engines howled like an avenging spirit, its heavy frame bristling with firepower. But it wasn't the machine that shocked them, it was the pilot. The call sign lit up. There comes Valkyrie inbound. The name spread through the ranks in whispers. Some had heard rumors of her, a woman who had flown missions no one else would dare. Enemies called her a phantom, a shadow with wings, because wherever she appeared, the battlefield turned to ruin. Few had seen her in action, and fewer still believed she was real, until now. The first strike was merciless. Diving low, she unleashed the Gatling gun, a weapon so devastating it could shred tanks like paper. The sound of the 30mm cannon ripped through the valley like thunder from the gods. Enemy armor exploded in showers of flame, convoys disintegrated, and the ground shook under the weight of her assault. The SEALs watched in awe as she carved the battlefield apart with surgical precision. She wasn't reckless. Every burst of fire landed exactly where it needed to, creating escape routes, silencing artillery, and collapsing the enemy's encirclement. For the first time in hours, the SEALs saw hope flicker on the horizon. Enemy commanders screamed into radios, ordering anti-air defenses to target her. Tracer rounds lit the sky, missiles streaked upward, but Valkyrie danced through the chaos like she had written the sky herself. She hugged the terrain, vanishing behind ridges, then reappearing at impossible angles. One by one, enemy weapons were destroyed before they could lock on. On the ground, the SEALs rallied. Move, use the cover, a commander barked, seizing the chance. With Valkyrie overhead, they pushed forward, regrouping and striking back. What was moments ago a death sentence had become an opportunity. The hunters had become the hunted. In less than 30 minutes, the tide of battle flipped. The valley that had been a grave now burned with wreckage. Enemy vehicles smoldered. Artillery lay silent, and the once confident ambushers were scattering in fear. The SEALs broke free, pushing toward safe ground under the constant shadow of Valkyrie's wings. When the guns finally fell silent, 381 men stood alive because of one pilot. They looked to the sky, watching as her Warthog circled once more before banking away. No victory lap, no grand announcement, just a silent exit, as though she had never been there. But they all knew the truth. Without her, every one of them would have been buried in that valley. And so the legend spread, not of 381 SEALs who survived, but of the lone woman in the sky who had saved them all. Her name became a whispered prayer, a reminder that sometimes the difference between life and death is a single pilot who refuses to let fear write the ending. Some battles are remembered for the soldiers who fought them. This one was remembered for the angel of fire who rained salvation from the clouds. The battlefield still smoked when silence finally settled over the valley. What had been a cauldron of fire and death was now eerily quiet, punctuated only by the hiss of burning vehicles and the distant groans of enemy survivors retreating into the mountains. The SEALs stood, battered and dust-streaked, staring at the destruction around them. For hours they had been trapped, counting down their last bullets, whispering silent prayers. Yet now, because of one pilot, they were walking out alive. Commander Hayes, the SEALs' field leader, pulled off his helmet and looked skyward. The Warthog was a dot in the distance, vanishing into the clouds like a ghost. He knew better than anyone what they had just witnessed. That wasn't luck. That wasn't routine air support. That was a pilot who had rewritten the course of a battle with sheer will and impossible skill. Who was that? One of his men asked, voice raw from smoke. Hayes paused. He had heard the name before. Valkyrie. In classified briefings, in whispered rumors across bases, in the mouths of operators who swore they'd seen her fly missions that no one should have survived. A ghost, they called her, but Hayes knew ghosts weren't real. He had just watched her tear an army apart single-handedly. Hours later, when the SEALs reached safe territory, the debrief was tense. Higher command demanded to know how the operation had nearly turned catastrophic. But as soon as Valkyrie's name entered the report, the room shifted. One general leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Valkyrie, he muttered, almost to himself. She's still flying. Hayes frowned. Sir, who is she? The general's expression hardened. That's above your pay grade, Commander. What you need to know is this: she's not standard Air Force. She was pulled into a special program years ago. Missions that didn't officially exist. Operations too risky for anyone else. Most of her record is classified. Sealed. Then why haven't I heard of her? Hayes pressed. The general gave a dry smile. Because she doesn't want to be heard of. Valkyrie flies in when all hope is lost. And then she disappears again. Her real name was Captain Elena Drake. Born into a military family. She had grown up watching her father fly F-16s and her mother serve as a decorated Navy officer. But where others followed the rulebook, Elena bent it. She had a natural instinct for flying that no simulator, no textbook, no training manual could replicate. By her mid, she was already a standout in the cockpit, earning top marks but making enemies with her refusal to play politics. Where others sought promotions and recognition, she sought only the sky. That stubborn streak caught the eye of a covert joint ops program that needed someone fearless, precise, and invisible. She became Valkyrie. Her missions ranged from surgical strikes deep inside enemy territory to rescue runs where entire squads depended on her alone. Over the years, she had saved hundreds of lives, but she never once stayed for the applause. For Elena, flying wasn't about glory, it was about duty. While U.S. forces whispered her name like a legend, the enemy feared her like a curse. In intercepted communications, they called her the Woman of the Sky. Entire units had been routed by her presence alone. Commanders had learned that if her call sign appeared on intercepted channels, their men would hesitate, morale would crack, and sometimes entire attacks would be abandoned. And now, in this valley where 381 SEALs had nearly fallen, that legend had grown sharper. Survivors of the ambush would tell stories of how one aircraft had shattered their trap in minutes. Word would spread like wildfire. The enemy had set out to destroy America's best warriors, and instead, they had been destroyed by a single woman with wings. Back at base, the SEALs couldn't stop talking about her. Hardened men, many with years of combat behind them, spoke of the moment with awe. Some described it as divine intervention. Others compared it to watching death rain down, but death that chose sides. For Hayes, though, it was something deeper. He had seen countless air support missions, precision strikes, drone runs, bombing campaigns, but this was something else. Valkyrie didn't just provide support. She flew like she was inside the battle, like she could feel the ground troops' desperation in her bones. He knew then that she wasn't just a pilot. She was a soldier, same as them, only her battlefield stretched across the skies. Captain Elena Drake didn't wait for medals or recognition. The moment the SEALs were safe, she logged her flight, ran post-operation checks, and returned to her quarters alone. She didn't turn on the TV or scroll through news feeds. She didn't need to see her name on reports. It wouldn't be there anyway. What mattered was that 381 men were alive because of her. That was enough. She sat by the small window of her barracks, staring at the night sky. She allowed herself one brief smile. Tomorrow there would be another mission, another crisis, another battlefield where her name wouldn't be spoken, but her presence would decide the outcome. For the SEALs who lived to tell the tale, the mission would forever be remembered not as their nit, but as the day a shadow with wings saved them. Years later, recruits would whisper the story during training. Commanders would reference it in hushed tones, and enemies would never forget the fear. But for Elena Drake, the woman behind Valkyrie, it would be just another night at war. Some pilots fly missions. Valkyrie flew legends, and in that valley of fire, 381 SEALs learned why her name would never be forgotten. The ambush wasn't chance. It was a masterpiece of enemy planning. For weeks, intelligence officers would later learn, enemy commanders had studied satellite images, intercepted chatter, and mapped the terrain like chess masters setting their board. Every cliff had been marked for gun placements, every ravine mined, every approach sealed. They didn't just want to win a battle, they wanted a massacre that would echo across headlines worldwide. Destroy 381 Navy SEALs in one crushing blow, and the world would see America bleed out at first. The SEALs moved through the valley with confidence. The terrain was rough, jagged rocks, dust-filled air, cliffs looming like silent giants, but it was nothing they hadn't faced before. They had pushed through jungles, deserts, and frozen wastelands. A valley was no different, or so they thought. The first mortar changed everything. It landed not 20 feet from the lead squad, the explosion ripping apart silence with deafening violence. Shards of rock became weapons, cutting into skin, tearing through gear. Before the dust cleared, automatic gunfire echoed from the ridges. Dozens of muzzle flashes lit the cliffs above contact. Hayes bellowed, diving behind a boulder. His men scrambled, instinct kicking in, forming defensive positions. But the fire wasn't sporadic, it was coordinated, precise. Mortar bracketed their position, machine gun nests stitched to the ground with deadly lines of fire. In less than 5 minutes, the SEALs went from a unit on mission to prey caught in a hunter's cage. Radio calls went out for air support, but the comms returned only static jamming. Someone had thought ahead. Hayes gritted his teeth. We hold, we fight through. But in his gut, he knew this wasn't an ambush they could punch their way out of. They were surrounded, pinned, and running low on ammo. His men, the finest warriors he had ever commanded, were about to be written off as casualties, hundreds of miles away. Captain Elena Valkyrie Drake sat strapped into the cockpit of her A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog. She had just finished a long sortie and was heading back to base when the scrambled transmission came through, barely a whisper under the enemy's jamming. SEAL Unit Valley, heavy fire, trapped. Most pilots would have dismissed it. Too faint, too garbled, too risky. But Elena wasn't most pilots. Her instincts sharpened instantly. She banked hard, checking fuel, weapons, loadout, and coordinates. She knew the valley, it was a kill box if ever there was one. Any pilot entering that airspace risked never coming back. Anti-aircraft guns, mobile SAMs, even shoulder-fired rockets could be waiting. But she also knew something else. If she didn't go, 381 men would die. Her fingers tightened on the controls. "This is Valkyrie. Diverting course. Tell ground command. I'm going in." No one answered. The jamming swallowed her words. She was alone. Good. She preferred it that way. The SEALs fought with everything they had. Grenades arced up toward cliff nests. Snipers fired controlled shots, dropping enemy gunners one by one. But for every enemy they silenced, 3 more seemed to appear. Ammunition magazines lay scattered empty across the rocks. Voices grew hoarse with exhaustion. Even seasoned veterans felt the creeping shadow of despair. And then they heard it, a low rumble at first, like thunder rolling across the mountains. Heads turned skyward. Dust whipped across the valley floor as the roar grew louder, sharper. A sound every soldier recognized but dared not hope for. One SEAL's eyes widened. No way. No freaking way. The A-10 burst through the clouds, nose down, wings bristling with weapons, and at the helm Valkyrie. Elena's eyes scanned the chaos below. Her HUD lit up with targets, but she didn't need computers to tell her what mattered. She saw the SEALs pinned down, the artillery positions on the ridges, the armored convoy creeping into range. Her thumb slid over the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon, a 7-barreled beast that could spit 70 rounds a second, roared to life. Broke. The sound thundered through the valley, drowning gunfire, drowning fear. Enemy positions evaporated in sprays of dirt and flame. Vehicles exploded, mortars silenced, mid-fire, the ground itself seeming to tremble beneath the storm. To the SEALs, it was like the heavens had opened. Death had come, but it wasn't for them. Hayes shouted into the chaos. "It's Valkyrie. Move, move, move." The men surged forward, using her cover fire to push towards safer ground. Enemy commanders barked orders into radios, panic cracking their voices. Anti-air, get her down. Missiles streaked into the sky. Tracer rounds painted the air, the valley turning into a deadly net designed to swat her from the heavens. But Elena was ready. She banked hard left, pulling the Warthog so low the wheels nearly kissed the ridge. Missiles locked onto her heat signature, but she dumped flares, weaving through canyons like she had been born in the sky. One rocket exploded harmlessly against a cliff. Another spiraled into its own launcher when she baited it back down. Her voice was calm inside the cockpit, but her pulse hammered. One mistake, and she'd join the wreckage below. But fear wasn't part of her equation. These men on the ground weren't strangers. They were brothers enough. If they fell, she fell with them. Pass after pass, Valkyrie dismantled the trap. Machine gun nests shattered. Artillery crews abandoned their posts, fleeing into the hills. Armored convoys burned, sending black smoke billowing into the sky. The SEALs, reinvigorated, rallied behind her thunder. They advanced in squads, reclaiming ground inch by inch. Grenades cleared trenches. Suppressed men shouted war cries as adrenaline drowned exhaustion. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours, but the tide had shifted. What had been a slaughterhouse was now a rout. Enemy survivors broke ranks. Some dropped weapons, running for their lives. Others hid in shattered bunkers, unwilling to face the wrath raining from above. When the last gun fell quiet, the valley was unrecognizable. Smoke curled from burning wrecks. The air stank of scorched metal and dust. The SEALs stood together, still alive, still breathing, staring at the destruction around them. 381 men, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. Up above, the A-10 circled once, a guardian angel ensuring the battlefield was truly theirs. Then, without ceremony, Valkyrie banked toward the horizon. Disappearing into the clouds, there were no words for what she had done, only silence. Silence and awe. In a valley built to bury them, 381 Navy SEALs walked out alive. And above it all, the legend of Valkyrie carved itself into history, not in medals, not in reports, but in the memory of every man who saw her descend from the clouds like fire incarnate. The valley lay silent now, except for the crackle of flames and the distant groans of twisted steel. The SEALs gathered in the wreckage, their eyes still darting to the skies, expecting another strike, another ambush. But no attack came. Only the fading roar of the A-10's engines echoed across the cliffs as Valkyrie disappeared into the horizon. Commander Hayes pulled off his helmet, sweat and dust streaking his face. His men cut, bruised, some limping, formed around him. All 381 accounted for. Against every prediction, not a single SEAL had been left behind. But there was no celebration. only stunned silence. One of the younger SEALs, Private Nolan, broke it. "Sir, who was that?" Hayes didn't answer right away. He stared at the smoke trails in the sky, as if the answer lingered somewhere above the clouds. "That," he finally said, his voice low, "was the reason you're alive." The room buzzed with tension. Screens replayed drone footage of the battle. SEALs pinned, mortar firing, enemy swarming, then the sudden arrival of an A-10 that tore the ambush apart. Analysts froze frames, zoomed in on explosions, calculated casualty ratios. Generals leaned forward, their jaws tight. One number kept repeating on every report: 381 saved, 0 lost. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Marcus Avery, broke the silence. "Who authorized her?" Silence. No one answered. Avery's fist slammed the table. "I want names. I want her call sign, her squadron, her commanding officer." A junior officer spoke hesitantly. "Sir, we can't find her." "What do you mean, can't find her?" "She's not in the system. No flight plan filed, no dispatch order. The A-10 wasn't even on our operational board. It's like he stopped, swallowing. It's like she doesn't exist." The room darkened. Eyes turned toward the CIA liaison, who had been silent the whole time, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Maybe," the liaison finally said, "that's the point." By dawn, whispers of the event had already slipped through encrypted channels. SEALs called home in hushed tones, their voices trembling as they described the woman in the sky who had pulled them from certain death. Military forums buzzed with rumors. Anonymous posts described a ghost pilot who showed up in hopeless battles, then vanished before anyone could thank her. Some called her an angel. Others called her a myth. A few insisted she was part of a classified Black Ops program no one dared acknowledge. On the other side of the world, enemy forces told a different story. Survivors of the Valley ambush spoke in fearful tones, describing a woman's voice echoing through the skies as fire rained down. In their she was less a pilot and more a demon, unleashed proof, they said, that America had built weapons not of flesh but of myth. Her name spread across languages. Valkyrie Elena Drake sat alone in the dim light of her quarters, flight suit half unzipped, her hands still trembling faintly from the adrenaline. The A-10 had been stripped, refueled, and hidden away in a hangar marked under maintenance officially. It hadn't flown at all. Her reflection in the mirror showed the same face she had seen for years: strong jaw, tired eyes, a faint scar tracing her temple from an old training accident. But tonight, she felt different. She had saved 381 men. She had done what no one else could. And no one would ever know. Her phone buzzed. A secure line. She answered. A voice, calm and clipped, spoke through the static. "You broke protocol." Her jaw tightened. "They were going to die. You risked exposure." "I don't care." There was a pause. "Then you will when you realize what comes next." The line went dead in Washington. A storm brewed. Some generals demanded she be tracked down, decorated, paraded across headlines as a symbol of American air power. Others insisted she remain a ghost, her existence classified, her missions erased. The CIA pushed hardest for silence. "If you make her public, you compromise every operation she's ever flown," the liaison argued. "Her advantage is anonymity. The myth is more powerful than the metal." But Avery wasn't satisfied. "My men don't fight for myths. They fight knowing someone has their back. If we don't tell them who she is, how the hell are they supposed to trust the sky?" The debate raged, but no decision came. Valkyrie remained what she had always been: an unacknowledged force, hovering between rumor and reality. Back at their forward base, the 381 SEALs gathered in the mess hall. No music played. No toasts were made. They sat quietly, nursing coffee, staring into the distance. Finally, Sergeant Cole raised his cup. "We don't know her name. We don't know where she came from. But every damn one of us owes her our lives." Hayes lifted his own. "To Valkyrie," the men echoed it, low but resolute. To Valkyrie it wasn't just a toast. It was a vow. Sleep didn't come as it. Every time Elena closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the valley, the muzzle flashes, the cries over radio, the missile lock warnings screaming in her cockpit. She had been trained to live with ghosts, but these weren't ghosts of men she had lost. These were ghosts of men who lived only because of her, and she couldn't tell them, couldn't tell anyone. Her call sign was whispered across continents, but her real name remained locked away in classified files. To the world, she was a phantom. To herself, she was just a soldier, tired and alone, yet deep down, she knew this was only the beginning, because enemies who had tasted her wrath would not forget. They would plan, they would adapt, and one day, they would set another trap, this time. Not for the SEALs, but for her. And when that day came, the myth of Valkyrie would be tested like never before, in the halls of power. Her name was debated. In the barracks of warriors, her name was toasted. And in the shadows of the enemy, her name was feared. But for Captain Elena Drake, the question remained: how long could a myth survive before the world demanded to meet the woman behind it? The myth had grown too powerful. Across enemy networks, chatter buzzed with one name: Valkyrie. She was no longer just a pilot. They spoke of her as if she was supernatural, an angel of death who descended when all seemed lost. Some whispered she was not a woman at all. but an American weapon machine controlled from satellites, immune to fear, fatigue, or failure. But behind the myth, Elena Drake sat quietly in her bunk, reading the reports she wasn't supposed to see. Intelligence intercepts, enemy propaganda, and one detail made her pause. The enemy wasn't just afraid. They were preparing. 2 weeks later, intel reached the Pentagon. A SEAL recon unit had gone missing near a desert stronghold. The situation reeked of an ambush, obvious, too clean. Every indicator suggested the enemy wanted a rescue attempt. General Avery's advisors debated for hours. Some argued it was too risky. Others insisted America couldn't leave men behind. But Elena knew the truth before anyone said it out loud. This wasn't about the SEALs, it was about her. She walked into the operations briefing uninvited, her presence turning heads. "You're going to send me," she said flatly. Avery's jaw clenched. "We didn't call you in. You don't have to. They set the trap for me. If I don't go, they'll tighten the net until you have no choice." Avery glared, but said nothing. Everyone in the room knew she was right. Night cloaked the desert when Elena climbed into her Warthog. The ground crew worked in silence, eyes averted. Everyone had heard the whispers. Everyone knew this wasn't a normal mission. Her co-pilot's seat remained empty, as it always did. She had never flown with one. No one dared. She flicked the comms. "This is Valkyrie, wheels up." No one replied. They never did. The desert stretched endlessly beneath her wings. Sandstorms whipped across the dunes, masking enemy convoys moving into position. Through her targeting pod she saw it, the missing SEALs. They weren't tied up. They weren't wounded. They were bait left in the open, guarded just enough to make it believable. And surrounding them, hidden in trenches and camouflaged nests, were rows of anti-air batteries, missile launchers, and radar-guided guns. Dozens of them, all locked onto the sky. Her sky. The trap had been set, and she had flown straight into it. The alarms screamed before she even had time to breathe. Missile locks flared across her HUD, red triangles multiplying faster than she could count. Elena pushed the throttle, the Warthog's engines howling. She dove low, hugging the dunes, flares spitting from her wings. The first missile streaked past her canopy. So close she felt the shockwave rattle her teeth. "All right," she muttered through clenched teeth. "You wanted me. Come and get me." She swung back around, guns roaring. Her 30mm Gatling cannon shredded a line of camouflaged trucks, flames blossoming in the night. But for every target she destroyed, 3 more lit her radar. It was a storm of fire, and she was alone in the center of it. Down below, the trapped SEALs saw their chance. Hayes, still battered from the last battle but unbroken, shouted orders. "Move, she's spying us a window." They surged forward, breaking from the kill zone, returning fire against the stunned enemy infantry. They had no idea if Valkyrie could hold out, but if she was risking her life, they weren't about to waste it. A missile clipped her left wing, shaking the Warthog violently. Alarms blared, warning of hydraulic failure. The A-10 wasn't built for elegance, it was built to take damage and keep flying. But even it had limits. Smoke trailed from her fuselage. Her vision blurred from the GI forces as she banked hard, skimming so low across the dunes that sand kicked up in her wake. "Not today," she growled. She looped wide, then cut back in, unleashing hell. Rockets streaked, cannons thundered, explosions rippled across the battlefield. Dozens of enemy gunners abandoned their posts, terrified of the storm she brought with every pass. But the trap wasn't broken yet, not even close. Through the smoke, another roar rose, different from her engines. Elena's stomach sank as she caught the shape on her radar. An enemy fighter jet, sleek and fast, screaming toward her at supersonic speed. The ground trap hadn't been the only card they had saved. The ace for last. Her fingers tightened on the stick. The Warthog was powerful, but slow, a relic from another era. Against a modern fighter she didn't stand a chance unless she made one. The jet swooped in, firing a burst of missiles. Elena rolled hard, flares exploding behind her, dodging by inches. Her cannon spat rounds upward, forcing the enemy to veer. The duel began, her old war machine against his cutting-edge speed. Every second stretched into eternity as the desert lit up with streaks of fire and tracer rounds in the distance. The SEALs watched in awe, torn between fear and belief. "Come on, Valkyrie," Hayes whispered. "Show him who owns the sky." Elena knew she couldn't outfly him, so she had to outthink him. She cut her engines for half a second, dropping speed so sharply the jet overshot, streaking past her. In that heartbeat she squeezed the trigger. A 30mm cannon roared. The rounds tore through the jet's tail, ripping it apart in midair. A fireball bloomed, lighting up the desert night. The SEALs erupted in cheers. Even Hayes, hardened and stoic, felt something burn in his chest. The trap had failed. The myth had survived. Elena's hands shook on the controls. Her Warthog was limping, systems failing one by one. She could still fly, but barely. Her cum crackled. For the first time in her career, she broke protocol. She spoke directly to the men on the ground. "Get out, all of you. I'll hold what's left." Hayes grabbed the radio, breathless. "You've done enough. Just get home." But the line went dead. She had already cut comms alone again. Always alone. She banked one last time. circling over the battlefield as the SEALs made their retreat. Her silhouette against the firelit sky burned itself into their memories. To them, she wasn't a pilot anymore, she was a guardian. The enemy had set a trap. They had thrown everything they had into breaking the myth. But as the desert burned and the SEALs escaped, one truth became clear. Valkyrie was not just a name, she was a storm, and storms could not be contained.